In this video, I'm going to show how to take a Microsoft Workbench relational model and use it to create a database and then start working with that database. So here's the Microsoft Workbench file that we created in the earlier videos. I'll use it to open Workbench. Here it opens Workbench with the model open, and we can open the drawing, the diagram to see it. Remember, I just have the details hidden. Now, we've made a model. We feel comfortable. Let's use it to make a database. So you go into the database menu and you choose Forward Engineer. So in this case, we're using a model to create SQL. So the first screen that you come to, you have to say which database you want to forward engineer to. I mean to say which server. So I want this to go to the server on my local host. I could also use it to forward engineer a database and create the SQL and make it on a remote server. Then you hit next. Then you have a lot of options here. I think the most important options for when you're generating the code is to generate drop statements and the drop schema statements. That means before all the create statements, you have a drop statement, which is a remove statement. So that makes sure that when you run this script over and over, it will delete the existing database items with the same name, so it will delete your tables and it will create the new ones. So always do that. Then before generating the SQL, you have to put in your password, and all we put in our model was tables, not views and triggers and other database things. So we're only working with tables. And then here it gives you a screen showing the SQL it created from your model. And we see there's the drop schema. A schema is like the schema for the whole database that contains all these tables. And it uses the default schema name MyDB. If you want your database to be named something else, you can just edit this file and run it with a different name. And then we see here it has all the create tables. So now this is legal SQL to create the tables and the foreign keys and the primary key indexes, all the things that we set up in our modeling tool. So it's always a good idea to save this to a file, which I will do, because more than likely you'll actually want to edit it. And I'll have another video about some edits that I always do to my creation scripts. But right now we'll run it as it is. So choose next. Now we're going to actually run this on the server. And there it is doing it. It's connected to the server, it ran the script, it checked for errors, no errors, everything's fine. So we're done. But now we want to start using that database. So if you go back to the home screen, you can connect to your local host and I already had some windows open and I closed them all, but they're still open. So here we'll see I already typed some SQL earlier, even though I deleted the database in between. So let's look at what we have on this screen. It's a very useful screen with lots and lots of parts. Down the side you have things that you can do with managing your database and users and so on. But here's the important thing for what we're going to do right now. Here's schemas. So right now we have two schemas. Sys, which is the default schema, which is the schema for the other schemas. It has the users and so on in it. And then MyDB, which is the schema we just created. And sometimes you need to put this refresh button to make sure your schemas are there. So here it is. If we want to use it, we have to double click on it and it becomes highlighted. So now MyDB is the current schema. So I'm going to go ahead and run this statement. So this SQL query windows, you can type SQL in here and you execute it using this lightning button. So now we ran the query select star, which means everything, from clinic. It means all the fields. So here's the result screen. So this is always how it turns out when you're using this screen. You have the query window, the result area, and the action output area, which is the place that tells you, you can see here what you ran, how long it took to run, what was returned, and if there's any errors, they will be shown down here as well. Okay, so there's no data in my table. Why? Because I haven't inserted any data into this database yet. Let's try some other tables. It always prompts you, MySQL, with different things you have, and you can use that to save some typing. So here we'll run that, and we see here we selected star all the fields of employee, employee ID, name, address, clinic, supervisor ID, but there are no rows. So we got all the columns but no rows because still there's no data. Now I can type another select here, and you see I can pre-fill it with the word doctor. So if you have two select statements here, if you hit this first lightning, it will run both of them. So I'll do it, and we see here in the results we got the employee results and the doctor results. If you only want to run one of them, whatever line you're on, you can use this lightning symbol, which shows, if you see it on your own screen, it's a lightning and a cursor. It means run the line the cursor's on. So when I run that, it's only the doctor table. And here you can see it's showing everything we've been doing while we were here. Now this area of the screen also lets you explore your database. So you see I clicked on the database and it shows me the things in my schema. Here's the tables in my schema. If we look, say, at the doctor table, we have the columns. If we click on columns, we have doctor ID, and here it's giving us the detailed information about each of the currently selected item in this Schema Explore area. Now over here there's some nice things, and as far as I'm concerned these are new since this new version of MySQL, and I find one very nice thing. So this is the result grid that we're showing now. It's just the answers from our query. But there's something called a form editor, and it makes a nice screen where you can add data to your database using a form. So let's try adding a doctor. Doctor ID was an int, so I'm going to type in 22 to try to add this to my database. Now, I hope some of you watching the video are going, no, that won't work, because it won't work. Let's see why. First, it shows us the insert statement that it generated, and that's quite right. Insert into my database.doctor, that's the table name, then the column name, doctor ID, the value 22. So let's run that SQL. Yeah, there's an error. What's the error? The error is a foreign key constraint error. Remember, it's a couple weeks ago now, there was one lecture slides about constraints on the relational model. And one of the types of constraints is a referential constraints. So we have a foreign key in doctor because it was a subclass of employee, which means that employee was the identifying relationship to doctor. So doctor ID can only be a number that already exists as employee ID in the employee table. And if we try to put some ID that doesn't exist, we will get an error. And that's exactly what should happen. So let's try something else instead. Let's try the clinic, because that is kind of the main table of this database. So let's select from clinic. Nothing's in there, but we'll go into the form editor and we'll go ahead and put in a clinic, the downtown clinic. Let's just make some address. This is my city in America. But not my house, 22 Street. And now apply. And so we can see this SQL insert into clinic, clinic name, address with the values downtown and this address right here. So apply, and it says successful. So now let's run this again. Now you see when we select from the clinic table, we have some data being returned. So there's so many helpful things on this screen that you can use that help you with writing your SQL, running SQL scripts, because you can just open scripts that you've saved, load them into one of these script windows, edit them, get the error checking done, and then run them, save your changes, and so on. So it's like an IDE just for SQL, and I really like it. All right, that's it for now.